What are the key findings of the global report on trafficking in persons?
The global report that UNODC is presenting today shows the great extent of the problem of trafficking persons around the world. And the most striking result is that it is the most vulnerable people that are trafficked, with 30% of all the victims around the world being children, with peaks in some regions like in sub-Saharan Africa and the Caribbean and Central America, reaching 60% of the victims being children. But also women are extensively trafficked all around the world, and 70% of all the victims globally are women and girls. So this shows really the extent and the misery in a way that the most vulnerable part of our population are affected with this type of crime.
What happens to people who are trafficked?
Well, typically, there are people in vulnerable position that they are given false promise for a better life, and then they are trapped into a cycle of exploitation where they are forced to, for the gaining of their traffickers, to all kinds of form of exploitation, and from sexual exploitation, forced labor, to forced marriage, shame marriage, to forced begging, or even the trafficking for the removal of organs. But we have seen that in some regions, like for example in North Africa and the Middle East, 3% of the victims are trafficked for the removal of organs.
And is it right that some children become combatants, become soldiers?
Yes, that's another form of trafficking that we have been seeing, particularly in conflict areas, where we see that there is a higher vulnerability to trafficking than in other parts of the world. And definitely what they expose the children are to become child soldier, but also children, and particularly girls, that are subject to sexual exploitation, sexual slavery, but we have also seen that refugees coming from conflict situation, and for example, particularly now we have seen the increased number of trafficking cases from Syria, where the conflict situation makes people more vulnerable and therefore more easy to be trafficked and more easy to be exploited by their traffickers on the way from the conflict situation to more safer places.
What has been done and what more needs to be done?
A lot has been done in terms of legislation, and we have seen that in the last 10 years there's been a lot of progress in countries promoting and approving new legislation that are compliant with the convention and the protocol that for the protection of trafficking person victims, where that criminalize traffickers while protecting the victims. But we are seeing that these legislations are not enough, because we have seen so many countries with a large number of victims with no conviction. So we see that there is still high impunity of this terrible type of crime that is affecting of humanity. So more needs to be done by government, but also by international organizations to support governments now to implement this legislation and to make a reality that traffickers are put and locked in prison for a long time while victims are protected.
Thank you very much.